I'm glad you're with me today. I have one of the top companies that fund franchise and business startups, one of the executives, one of the C-level folks, and I'm real excited. You are not going to want to miss this.
This is the Franchise Pitfalls and Profit Show. Each week, we bring you the challenges and triumphs of being in the franchise development and consulting business. The things you need to make money faster. And now your host, one of the most successful franchise developers in North America, Don Shin.
Hey, Eric.
Hey, Don, how are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us, folks. Let me introduce Eric and the company, and he can correct me or add a couple of things real quick onto this before we get started. But Benetrends, Eric's with Benetrends. He's the Chief Development Officer. He has been in this space, in this field, in this industry for 18 years. Benetrends, as they say, which I love this phrase, jump starts the American dream. Benetrends has been doing this for over 30 years. Eric and I were talking about Len Fisher. When I first got into franchising 23 years ago, Len was kind of out there doing it himself, and I think with his daughter. So got this unique funding and the funding of franchises specifically. So they've been doing it for over 30 years. They have helped over 30,000 people. They have innovative funding solutions. So I just thought Eric was going to be a C-level executive for Benetrends, was going to be one of the best interviews that we could have. So no pressure or anything, Eric. So anyway, Eric, anything you want to add to that as a quick intro?
No, I mean, listen, it's hard to try to step in when somebody starts talking about Len Fisher. I mean, it's hard to talk about people as pioneers these days, because a lot of our industry is perfecting somebody else's model that somebody else made, and
That's right.
with what Len built and what Benetrends has become. No, it's a perfect intro. We love what we do. We love the space that we operate in. We love working. We work with all small businesses, but Len kind of made that decision years ago that franchising was going to be a big part of what Benetrends does, and fast forward 35 plus years later, and 120 plus employees at Benetrends and thousands of entrepreneurs that we work with. It's kind of crazy.
It's hard not to get excited about helping people fulfill their dreams. I mean, that's why I stay, even at my age. I stay in this because I just love helping people do that and seeing them succeed, and just creating the lifestyles and the wealth and the quality of life through business ownership. And you guys are at the foundation of that. Without companies like Benetrends, businesses, people would not be able to do this. So let me get started there. As to just curious how you got into the business.
It's funny because it tells almost a good story of almost like, for those that are listening and don't even know about that program that Len pretty much pioneered, because I had spent the bulk of my career, in the traditional, come out of college, go to corporate. I worked for a company named Cintas, a uniform company, shirts, pants, mats, mops, and toilet paper. Very glamorous stuff. But great company for anyone works for them. Great sales training, sales organization. Moved about 5 times in 3 years, and different management positions and different opportunities. Met an amazing woman who's my now wife, who at that time had about a 2.5-year-old son. So you go from being 29 years old one weekend, going out with your buddies and having fun, and you want to move me here, move me there, I'm fine, to overnight kind of becoming a parent and realizing maybe I want something that I'll look somewhere else. And literally, Don, it's a recruiter friend of mine said, there's this company not too far from where you live. And their exact words were, I don't know what they do. It kind of sounds illegal, but I'm going to get you an interview there.
That is cool. I love that. That is a cool story. And I always say probably 80% of the people who start their own businesses through franchising come out of that corporate career. And so I think, you add a lot of value there. I was the same way. We had moved 7 times in 19 years corporately. Most of them before I'd say 5 or 6 of them were really before we had kids or before the kids were in school. So they were very, very easy corporate moves. But we got to a place where, and that's how I got into franchising and started my first franchise. We got to a place where daughter was 13, son was 8. We were not going to move, and so the desire to go into a franchise was really, really important to me, and a real driver there. So as I shared with you off camera, the audience today is franchisors, entrepreneurs, people wanting to get into business, also franchise brokers and consultants, helping people into business for themselves, helping them into franchising. I always kind of call them career coaches. So what do you think it takes? I mean, you're around funding businesses and you see all kinds of brands and stuff, and you see all kinds of people. So what do you think are a couple of the real key things that you think make successful transitions and successful franchise owners in the long run?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, because for our world, those different audiences, it's different things. So for the consultants, the franchise executives, the franchisors that are out there, emerging, established, for me, my message to them, it is still fascinating to me in this world of how much of the candidate's funding they leave in the candidate's hands. Wow. It is amazing. If I go to buy this franchise, oh, here's the equipment that we use. Here's our vendor for that. Here's where you're going to order your floor. Here's where you're going to do this. Here's where you're going to do this. Here's where you do that. How about funding? I don't know. Go out and find out if you can get a loan. It is fascinating to me. Oh, and this is not a Benetrends, whether you work with any of the great funding companies that are out there. About 99% of the time, if you're a franchisor, a franchise consultant, franchise development person, to have a funding partner, when it costs you nothing, they make a lot of commitments and tools and materials for you. They help your candidates get it. But ultimately, the easiest line to deliver what helps get deals done is, one, if you give the keys to the bus to the candidate, they're going to crash the bus.
I love that.
Their funding is such it is such an interesting, unique world, especially for dealing with the aspect of, getting small business loans and the different appetites of lenders. I mean, people think that I could go to 10 banks that all tell me no, and it has nothing to do with the business.
Right. Yeah.
It didn't fit their appetite, but people don't think that. So that's number one with that part of the audience. Same thing for the candidates. Look at all your options. People paint themselves into such a corner, and it's so based off of perception and not realities. Like the amount of times now that I get hey, I want to do an SBA loan. I want to do an SBA loan. I want to do an SBA loan. And I have fun with people, Don. I'll say, so, hey, listen, your home. Do you want to leverage your home at 8% or 4%? Well, 4. Your liquid. Do you want to use your post-tax liquid or your pre-tax liquid?
Yep.
Pre-tax. Okay, great. So just so you know, the two options you just chose were getting something like a home equity line of credit and using a rollover. The other options are using your cash and going an SBA loan, because the SBA is probably going to take the home as collateral, and that's around 8+%. HELOCs probably are going to be in 4 or 5. And then the rollover program, but no one starts there. They go with what they know. So for candidates, for development people, look at everything and start early. The amount of people that, again, it's always fascinating to see why this world operates so differently from anywhere else. If somebody said, I'm going to go look for a house today, what's the first thing they do? They get pre-qualified for a mortgage.
Yep. I was going to ask you about that, whether that's something that you recommend, or are you seeing that regularly now in our franchise world? Or
the best buyers, the best executives, the best brands literally get us people before they even decide to almost engage with them. Or even on the buyer side, how do I know what businesses I can look at if I don't know what I can afford? Whether you go that route or not, But it feels like financing is such like I was thinking this, if anyone's ever seen the movie Tommy Boy, and he's holding the piece of bread and he's like, I've got this magical deal and I don't want to mess it up. I feel like sometimes, people are like, well, I don't want, if they don't bring up funding and I don't bring up funding, then it must be okay.
That's right. That's right. When you're uncomfortable with it and you don't know that much about it, then your odds are you're going to defer or just not even deal with it. I was shocked. I have to tell you, many years ago, I had lunch with a gentleman I'd known for years, and he was a colleague of mine at a Fortune 200 size company. Dealt with hundreds of millions of dollars in his responsibility, and he was downsized. And I really wasn't trying to sell him a franchise or anything, but we were just talking about what I was doing. And I was shocked that he said, he made the statement, "Oh, I would not ever be able to start my own business. I wouldn't have the funds to do it." And yet in the same lunch date, he had told me, "Oh, their house was already paid off." And so I'm thinking like, Mike, what are you doing? So we shouldn't assume that people know how to do this. And I would say for franchising, like you mentioned earlier, for franchising, I want you talking more than me, but I would say most banks, I know when I went for it, it was an emerging brand I was buying. I was the first one in the US. I did end up with a bank with a business line of credit just because my credit scores were so strong and I could do that. But they were going like 4 weeks, 6 weeks, not giving me the funding. And finally I called, what's going on? Well, we don't really understand this business, And so I think, like you said, it doesn't fit a lot of your local banks, doesn't fit their portfolio to fund a new franchise.
Yeah, I would say thankfully that's true, because that's a big part of our business is as SBA packagers or almost loan brokers or matchmakers.
Yes.
Is what people do in the SBA space in the funding world, is knowing those appetites. But even more importantly, the only example I need is if I were to run down a list of the top 10 lenders in the franchise space nationally. When I say top 10, I mean, we're not talking like, oh, they did a cut. I mean, we're talking 10, 15, 20 plus $1 million in annual loaned out funds. You would think 8 or 9 of the top 10 were names I made up last night.
Wow,
like these are not the 3 or 4 big banks that we go and, deposit our checks and use our ATM. These are specific lenders that have said, this is our focus category. This is what we target. And people forget banks are businesses. They all have different appetites.
Yep.
Some banks say, I'm going to elephant hunt and I'm going to go and I want to do loans that are $1 million plus and they're resales, or we do franchising, but it's for the guy that already has or gal that has 2 or 3 open and they're going to go open 4, 5, and 6. That's not the bank I'm going to go and open my first fitness concept tomorrow.
Yeah.
But
and
there's other banks that do have that.
That's right. And the banking industry has really cycled. So I know around here for a while, there were small kind of community or regional banks opening like crazy. And then all of a sudden they were all bought up, by somebody bigger, and they went away. And so
I'll tell you what, some of these appetites, I can't quantify this. I think they're actually going to start exploding a little bit more to even be more open. My honest opinion, I think a lot of these banks had to hire during COVID. I know that sounds funny, but remember, all those PPP loans were all processed through the SBA departments of these banks. Now they have these robust departments. SBA has increased the guarantee. Some interest rates have gone up. These banks are going to want to put money out there. And it really is, if you don't use it, you lose it. So,
let's stay on that, Eric, because one of my questions was going to be, what kinds of trends are you seeing in funding right now or in franchising? You guys obviously have a lot of franchising experience, but so you were just hitting on some things. Any other trends or things that we as providers or helping people into business for themselves that we should know about?
When I look at some of the trends, I think it's actually, I always tell candidates this, and I would almost address the developers and brands like this, is rather than knowing what's the good stuff and the different ways to do it, more importantly, what are the trends or the negative thing? What's the wrong way?
Yep.
And I've actually seen, there's good trends of, looking to make sure of what banks are focused on here. You see a lot of these multi-brand networks that are all coming in and using that strength, and a lot of trends are combining different funding options. I've seen a trend of going out and trying to find conventional lenders to lock into a brand and say, listen, we're a good brand. Look at this. We want to, and we do this a lot. We match. Banks come to Benetrends all the time.
I bet.
Say,
yeah.
Where should we put our money?
Yeah.
We don't know what's out there, and we'll match a brand, and we'll get a bank to say, listen, we love it. We're going to earmark $20 million of our SBA funds for this brand, and we don't have to underwrite the brand anymore. It's just about, but the trends, it's an interesting thing. I'm seeing trends in franchising that don't match the trends in funding, especially with the bank side. Multi-territory or multi-unit development exploding. Let me get this many locations, this many licenses. That's nothing super new.
Right.
The development schedules have accelerated, for lack of better words. We want location 2 signed by 10 months after signing the franchise agreement. We want this by this time. That's great. Not going to work with a bank. If they're going to go and get funding for that second location. At least if they're getting that type of lending historically. And will they maybe catch up a little bit? Sure. But historically, a bank wants to see somebody have location 1 open for about 12 to 18 months before they're going to give them funding location 2. So we're seeing kind of a mismatched approach on that end. But that's what's opened up to the positive trends of, well, can we do the first one without SBA? And it makes it easier. And we bring in the rollover conventional loan. A great trend that I've seen done that matches well is this explosion of the service-based models. And we have a huge explosion of a lending appetite for equipment leasing lending. Non-SBA. And I think people think equipment, they think restaurant, they think fitness. We've got leasing companies that will, the vehicles, the wraps, the lifts, the equipment needed for that. And now you can use that, not go that, other route. And we've really seen a big appetite there. So that's been a really cool trend.
That's awesome. So tips for people that are looking to borrow, and as they're thinking about starting a business. You said about, start early, get pre-qualified. Any other thoughts along the way of things that people should be aware of before they come to Benetrends or go to their bank? Any other tips or recommendations on that?
Yeah, it sounds easier said than done, but the reason I say start early is when you start early, you don't have the pressure. And when you have pressure, you go with what seems easy. And I said before, perception and reality. Be open to all of your options and start to remove emotions and names and look at because we've talked about this before. We've talked about offline and, Len's program that he pretty much pioneered. I mean, every conversation I have is, hey, Eric, I want to use an SBA loan. I don't want to touch my home. And on top of that, I would never use my retirement funds. And I would tell you 90% of the time at the end of their process, that almost becomes flipped.
They're using it.
Well, why would I use my cash I already paid taxes on? I have access to these pre-tax dollars. It's no different than when Eric worked at Cintas and bought shares of Cintas in his 401k. He was funding Cintas through his retirement funds. All I'm doing is the same thing, but funding my own business. And I leave my cash. I don't leverage. So get started and just be open. I mean, people don't even think of their stock portfolio and the fact that they can leverage that like a home equity line of credit. But instead of using the home, you're using the portfolio. So when you look at the names, it's really important.
And I know I know I've personally worked with some of your, I apologize if you call them agents or reps.
Consultants,
Okay, consultants. And I know they've done a good job. They've got some great pieces that they've shared with me as the franchisor that I can share with my candidates to to do exactly that. Get educated, gain knowledge about the options, so that you just don't go in with tunnel vision as to what you think you should be doing. Eric, you've seen, and Benetrends has seen, as you said, over 30,000 people you've helped into business. Is there anything you've seen, like a characteristic of anybody that you would say, look, you're really not a good candidate to own your own business? Stay employed. So anything that, any kind of persons or characteristics or traits that we're still helping people tell. I mean, I've told people, I don't think you're a business owner, in a more polite way. So any thoughts on that? Any characteristics or things you may have seen? I know it's a little off the wall.
I think with the franchise model, I think almost anybody probably could if they find the right fit. I think it's more specific fits. Like coming from the world of Cintas, where I literally spent my first couple of years, walking around Staten Island, banging on doors and making cold calls, and somebody says they're going to buy a B2B business, but they don't like doing sales. I'm like, whoa, that shouldn't. I would say, I know it's probably an overused line in our space, but I think anything that gets overused is because it's proven itself over time, is if you want to go and do your own thing and not know what you're going to do each day and be the innovator and creator and fly by the seat of your pants, then franchising is probably not for you.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right.
And I respect that. Like, I love the fact that brands stick to that. Like, I love that, my wife is a hairstylist, and I love that most of the haircutting franchises won't sell her a franchise because they don't want the person that's working in the business. Most times they want them working on it. I always think of that movie, The Founder, with Michael Keaton, where he's Ray Kroc at McDonald's.
Yeah.
And he goes and he sees his buddies on the golf course, and they added fried chicken, and they did this, and they did that. It's like, this is what we do. We do it well, and let's stick to that. And if you want to do these other things, that's great. You just can't do it here.
Yeah. And you really hit on a good point, and that is that franchising helps people get into business that maybe didn't really have the overall either industry background for a certain type of business, or even some of the skill sets. By going with the franchise, they have a much greater probability of success. So
yeah, I mean, real quick, they're done. And I haven't, knowing like the consultant side and the buyer side and certain things there, I will tell you, not that somebody shouldn't want to buy a business that maybe they feel comfortable or familiar with. I would tell you, in my experience, that sometimes is almost a detriment more than a help. And I think so many people keep themselves away from amazing opportunities because they get focused on what the business does and not what the owner does.
Yeah. Very true. Yep. And
my favorite stories, there's a guy in North Jersey that I know. He runs an amazingly successful, big numbers, big business. And it's a business that works with children and swimming. He doesn't know how to swim. And then, he's not in the pool. He's not teaching. He's hiring the right people. He's managing the marketing. Right. And so I just think that people always need to, remember that.
That's a great story. Yeah, that's a great story. He's not. I got to remember that example. He's not in the pool, so it's not like you're going to be in the business. You want to be on the business. Yeah. Hey, as we wrap up, Eric, and I really appreciate all your insights here. This is really, really valuable. I always ask: is there anything I haven't asked, or if there's anything we haven't talked about that's kind of a final thought you would want to be sure that our audience hears? But we haven't talked about it yet. Is there anything else you think is important for the classic viewers of our podcast?
Yeah, of course, I'll be a little bit biased and a little, focused on the fact that, while Len Fisher and Benetrends pioneered that rollover funding program back in the early 80s and have done it successfully for the last 40 years, I know we've touched on it because it's in our world, but I still don't believe that people fully understand, and we don't have to go through the ins and outs and lefts and rights, but at the end of the day, anyone that's listening to this, from a developer, from a franchisor, to a consultant, to a prospective buyer, any funds that you have available from a previous employer, retirement funds, IRAs, rollover, all you need to know is that can be viewed as pure pre-tax liquid for business.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I'm not saying you have to do it. I'm not saying that you have to do all, but what I'm saying is to keep, without this program, that is bubble wrapped, and you'll never have access to it from any other area on a pre-tax basis. And I used the joke before, for anyone else listening, my last take home, people try to make it like it's this new crazy, like separate program. When I worked at Cintas, I had my 401k. I bought $100,000 of Cintas shares through my 401k. I'm sure many people are listening saying, yeah, okay. Well, your plan owns the shares that you bought.
Exactly.
Where did the money go that your plan used? And that's where I never connected the dots. That money went right to Cintas.
Yep.
And they were using that in their business. All rollover funding is that same thing, but instead of funding somebody else's business, you're funding your own. I think when people realize that, or how Len said it to me on that first day interview that I went to, he said, "Oh, Eric, so you own Cintas shares in your retirement plan?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Congratulations, you're already funding somebody's business with retirement."
That's right. That's right.
So it's so cool to see. And but no, I just think what we've covered: get in early, get your candidates started early. Think of funding as part of the process, not a hurdle.
Yep. Yep. And be open to the different options that might be better for you than you ever think. So, hey, great having you on the show, Eric. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.
You bet.